Hi guys, welcome to the first online lecture that you have found on my website. The approach that we're taking here is called flipping the classroom. In flipping the classroom, we are taking all the time that we spend and waste in the classroom and we're going to put it on the internet where you can view it at your convenience and take notes at your convenience. This will allow you to stop the video or rewind it if you want to go back and review something that you didn't quite understand. So with flipping the classroom, all the directed stuff that the teacher does is done on the outside of the classroom. When we come into the classroom, we can really take advantage of the time we have together to review, to do some enrichment activities, and to deal with primary sources, which I believe is a critical part in teaching history. Well, if you haven't already, you want to go online and print off the note packet, Two Worlds Collide, and it would be really helpful obviously to have your pencil ready, have your notes ready, and continue on with this lecture here. So the first part of Unit 2, Two Worlds Collide, is dealing with how Native Americans first arrived here. If you'll notice, the first question on page 3 of your note packet is, how did first Americans arrive in present-day United States? First, let's talk about the name Native Americans. We call them natives. However, these people didn't come from America. Rather, they came from another continent and migrated to America. So to say Native Americans means the source or their birth was from the continent of North America. But later on in the lecture, you'll see that that's not true. Also, another name we call them is Indians. And of course, you should already know with 4th or 5th grade history that Columbus, on his search for India, had actually landed in the Bahamas. But since he thought he was in India, he called the natives there Indians, and that name just kind of stuck in the perspective of the Europeans. But probably a more appropriate name is going to be the first Americans. It was the people who first arrived in North America through migration. Or they like to be referred to as the people. All right, and trying to get us to that point to see how these first people arrived in North America, we need to talk about the last ice age, which was 100,000 to 12,000 years ago. You see, much of the Earth's water was frozen in the glaciers during this ice age. You imagine a bottle of water. Okay, it's filled up with water. Let's imagine that this is the ocean, and on both sides of the ocean you have land masses, or my hands. So let's stick this in the freezer, and what do you think will happen? You're right, as it freezes, the water or the ice is going to go to the weakest part of the bottle, and you would probably find that the bottle would come off and the water would actually expand upward. When water freezes, it expands, the ice molecules expand. And so all this water in the ocean, a lot of it was caught in these glaciers. So with the ice masses going up, sea levels are going to go down. So sea levels were 300 feet lower than they are today. So with that sea level dropping, there's going to be a land bridge that is going to be exposed, and that is Beringia. Beringia, as you can see the pronunciation here, Beringia, was a land bridge that connected Siberia to Alaska. Siberia being the most eastern part of Russia, or the Asian continent. So it connects Siberia to Alaska, and this land bridge then allowed a crossing of the Bering Sea, that water that is now between Russia and Alaska. So people would migrate from that continent into North America by using that land bridge. I want to go ahead and click on this and show you a picture of the land bridge in more detail. Bear with me as I'm switching items over from the other screen. Enlarge this here for you. So here you have what is called Siberia, and right here we have Alaska. And let's say that this lightly shaded area is what land would be exposed when that sea level drops. So you can see that all this land here, this land bridge, allowed animals to cross over and actually go to another continent. And of course, that would be a food source for people, and so people would follow the animals. So, push that back over there, and we'll head on to the rest of our lecture. The first Americans were nomadic. That means that they followed their prey. So when Beringia was exposed, animals went from Siberia, crossed Beringia or the land bridge, and worked their way into what is now today Alaska. So over many generations, the nomads had migrated down Alaska, down through Canada, into what is now present-day United States of America. And what they find there are just tons and tons of big wild beasts like buffalo that they can use for a food source. Now, in your notes, I'm going to ask you to draw Beringia on the map, and hopefully you've done that with the last picture that we had up here. And now I want to show you migration routes. All right, and we'll slide this one over here, blow it up a little bit for you. This is just going to show you the migration routes of, obviously the animals coming down through here and the first Americans. So from Siberia, again, you have Beringia right here, which is exposed from the lower sea levels. And these are the migration routes that the animals and the people are going to take. And they take a very narrow approach in through here in northern Canada because there were two big ice shelves on either side. But once they got into more southern Canada, into the northern part of North America, and these groups then began to split apart and settle in different regions of North America. Like I said, what they found in North America were an abundant source of giant beasts like buffalo. And with these kind of beasts, like buffaloes or woolly mammoths, you could find a pretty abundant source of meat, and this meat would last for months for a family or a group of family. But they used the whole part of these animals, the mammoths and the buffalo. They would use the bones and the fur and the fat, which provided weapons, tools, clothing, and oil. So with abundant animals around, the first Americans began to settle down. They didn't have to be constantly on the move or be so nomadic. But after a while, many years, the beasts eventually began to die out. The source was being depleted. So now the nomads, who were now already kind of accustomed to staying in place, wanted to stay in place. That's how they've lived for a few generations now. They had to rely on other sources. So they began fishing, gathering nuts and berries, and planting. And I have here maize. That was one of your vocab words, maize, which is the younger version of corn. So with fishing and gathering and planting, these first Americans, or descendants of first Americans, start having a stable food supply. And if the food supply is stable and they're staying nourished, then they're going to kind of stay put in communities where they're already at. But staying put is going to give obviously more freedom to do more things because of the time. You're not spending all that time in traveling, so it frees up some of your time. And again, your populations are going to increase due to staying put and being closer to people. So with more time, tribes are going to work to improve their lives since they aren't always on the move. They don't have to be light on foot anymore. They can stay put and really be more stationary. So they started building permanent shelters. They started working more on their culture with pottery and clothing and art. And they even started setting up governments. And the culture is going to be more defined throughout times in their customs and their beliefs and their rituals. Now, depending on where these first Americans or Native Americans, depending on where they had migrated or where they settled in what is now today the United States of America, would kind of depend on what kind of culture. Okay, now on page 4 of your packet, it says list some Native American contributions to our current society, and I have a list here. First and foremost, we got to talk about corn. That was a major contribution of the first or Native Americans to our current society. We're going to refer to it as maize in this unit. Now, with popcorn is obviously going to come from corn. They knew how to make chocolate, grow and harvest tobacco, even tomatoes. They came up with a very good way of taking down trees, hollowing it out to make canoes, and we can even credit them with coming up with a primitive form of the sport lacrosse. Also, calendars that were mathematically accurate. And last here, you probably can't see behind the X here, but on there was horses. Horses are not native to America. Actually, it was the Spaniards during the Age of Exploration that brought over horses into North America. So 12,000 years ago then, temperatures start to rise. And in that rise of temperature, you're going to find that the glaciers are going to melt. So with the glaciers melting and the water becoming a liquid, or the ice becoming a liquid, water levels are going to begin to come up. So as that water is coming up, it's going to then flood out Beringia, or the land bridge, by the Bering Sea. So now that land bridge is going to be covered up, and this connection between Siberia and Alaska is now lost. So now America is cut off from Asia. So just to review some of the main concepts in this lecture, and you can fill this out on page 4 here, summarizing what you've learned today in that flowchart on page 4. We begin with number 1. During the Ice Age, nomads migrated to America by the land bridge we call Beringia. When they get to America, they find a stable food supply that we had discussed before, buffalo, mammoths. And because they have a stable food supply, they can stay put or become stationary and start building their communities. With stable communities that stay put, you're going to have the ability to improve life. Now, depending on where they migrated, where they settled, which region of the United States they settled, there are going to be different ways of life. In this different way of living, like whether you're in the Southwest or the Northwest or the Southeast, you're going to get diversification or variety. So you're going to have different cultures that are going to come up. And that's how different native nations have different ways of living, because they had to adapt to their environment. Right? So that ends the first videotape lecture. Hopefully you found it helpful, and we'll probably talk about it in class and get some feedback from you guys. Again, if there's a part of the lecture that you missed or didn't understand, you can always rewind and go back to it. You can always hit pause to write down notes that are on the screen to help you out. So this ends the first lecture, and I'll see you in class.